Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the East Lyme Board of Selectmen. It is November 20th. This meeting is to be convened immediately following the special town meeting which just occurred. All set, Robert? We're good? Thank you, sir. We just had the Pledge of Allegiance, and I don't believe there are any additional agenda or consent calendar items.
None.
So that will lead us with delegations. Is there anybody that would like to speak to the board under public delegations? Sir, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is John Cesario, and I live at 15 Darrows Ridge. And one of my concerns is in 2008, the first selectman signed an agreement, a compromise agreement with New England National and Niantic Realty, which incorporated Mosterway Road improvements. And it's 5 years into it, and nothing has been done. Unfortunately, the lawsuit has not been settled, and it was interesting listening to some of the line items that just occurred, because the attorney's bills have been approximately $500,000 in the 5 years since that 2008 compromise agreement. And in light of the recent lawsuit that's filed, and I know you guys do a lot of good work, and Mr. Formica, I know you're a dedicated public servant, and a lot of people have respect for you. But in light of you being named as a defendant and having unlawful charges leveled at you, according to the East Lyme Charter, the standards of conduct, any person that has a conflict of interest should step aside from the decision-making in that particular issue. And you are now a named defendant in a civil conspiracy, which probably goes back to the June 11th Board of Selectmen meeting, when the town, from a motion by Mr. Nickerson, decided to indemnify AIG, leaving the taxpayers on the hook for all of the attorney's fees and all of the final expenses or settlement costs in this lawsuit. I mean, based on the town charter, it's pretty evident that Mr. Nickerson and Mr. Formica should probably step aside and recuse themselves. And I understand Mr. Seri and the other board, well, actually Mr. Wilson voted for that also, but there are at least two board members that didn't vote to indemnify the taxpayers against AIG. So in light of what happened in Montville, and I'm sure you're aware that charges of bad faith turned a $5 million lawsuit brought by Robert Kraft's company into almost a $17 million settlement, it's probably advisable that you do step aside. Again, you are named as a defendant. So it's probably a good idea that you should recuse yourself from any of the matters related to that lawsuit. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cesario. Anyone else like to speak to the board under public delegations? Sir.
My name is John Ellis, Chairman of the Woodsman Land Trust, Old Saybrook, Connecticut.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for honoring my request for an extension. Also want to, again, express my desire and willingness to work with the board and the residents of East Lyme in providing all the necessary information on the Woodsman Land Trust Extraordinary Open Space Plan and proposal. I sent an article to the Board of Selectmen in my most recent correspondence to them, which was published in the Hartford Courant, regarding the town of East Haddam and East Haddam Land Trust, which exemplifies the public-private partnership template the town of East Lyme should and could use, not only for the WLT proposal, but for the future open space and environmental conservation opportunities. Our neighbors to the north and west, Old Lyme, Lyme, Salem, and East Haddam, have been utilizing the DEEP open space and watershed land acquisition program for the past decade. As an example, East Haddam was awarded 3 matching grants by DEEP in 2010 and 2 matching grants in 2012 that total $1,357,500 matching grants. As I've done with the New England National and its principals, I'm imploring the Board of Selectmen and its members to put aside any personalities or issues that may cloud their judgment or interfere with the vetting of my plan. Thorough review and consummation of this incredible opportunity needs to be explored. While I'm respectful of the sensitive nature and emotion regarding the pending litigation with New England National, it is my firm belief that both sides of this long-standing dispute could act in the better good through cooperation and communication. In my humble opinion, the resolution of this costly and protracted litigation would certainly be in the best interest of all parties, but most importantly, the citizens of East Lyme. The financial resources currently being expended by both parties could and should be utilized in a manner much more productive. Appraisals and grant writers who could write for a grant for the town. With regard to the recently announced 2014 DEP Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant Program, I'm strongly encouraging the Board of Selectmen to take advantage of this timely opportunity that has recently become available. The town of East Lyme can and should submit 2 grant applications to the DEP, the first one being for a conservation easement on the Darrow Pond property the town currently owns, and the second one being on the property on Upper Patagonia Road that I am referring to in my submission to the town of East Lyme. The applications need to be submitted by January 31st, 2014. The town could receive possibly 2 $500,000 matching grant, 2 $500,000 grants for a total of $1 million, with, if matched, will be $2 million. It was unfortunate the town of East Lyme and the Trust for Public Lands were unable to take advantage of the 2012 grant opportunity. As you may recall, this was provided for and recommended in the contract between the town of East Lyme and the Trust for Public Lands. It is imperative that we work together and be more thoughtful and prudent with financial opportunities available to help subsidize the goals and recommendations of the town of East Lyme Plan of Conservation and Development. Our motto should be, public-private partnership should be every dollar raised is a dollar saved for the taxpayers of East Lyme. One last thought. My family grew up in East Lyme. I hunted and fished in East Lyme, and the leadership in East Lyme is something that I'm proud of. My point to you is that with these opportunities, I'm almost begging you to reach out and make applications, get $1 million in grants, get matching grants, and my proposal will cost the town nothing. So thank you for having me here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again, and thank you for accepting my proposal today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Would anybody else like to speak to the board under public delegations? Mr. Cesario, would you like to speak again?
Yes, I'd like to speak to Mr. Ellis's proposal. I'm not 100% sure about the details, but if it involves that the lawsuits against the town end up being dismissed by New England National and you get grants to subsidize it, it would probably be in the best interest of East Lyme. Again, I haven't read the proposal, but you know, the fact of the matter is you indemnified an insurance company and took on the risk of the litigation and put it on the taxpayer's back. If this is a way, and you vet it out, and it makes sense for the town, and it gets rid of the easement issues from the $4.2 million issue across the pond, which I'm not fully versed on, it's definitely something that you should consider. I'm not a spokesman for Mr. Ellis. I just think that it might make sense to at least look at it and put it to the public for a vote and let them say yes or no. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cesario. Anyone else like to speak to the board under public delegations? Hearing none, then we'll move
No,
to...
you got one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Mr. Stefacci. Forgive me. Thank you.
Yes, I've read about Mr. Ellis. Oh, I'm sorry,
Good evening,
John.
sir.
Just
Good
pull,
evening.
pull the microphone down a little bit. So
Good evening, John
there you go.
Strafacci, 16 Darrows Ridge Road.
Thank you, sir.
I've
Good evening.
read about Mr. Ellis's proposal. While I've got some serious concerns as it relates to some of the property and the business with Mr. Torrance's companies and so forth. However, some of the sort of the process that he's talking about the DEP grants and so forth, seem to be projects that I'd be curious to know why we either didn't pursue those when we purchased the Darrows Pond property that's the subject of the easement this evening. It seems to me that that would have been an ideal project, that if there was substantial grant money, I think the general consensus was we paid substantially above fair market value for the property. It would have been nice for the taxpayers to get some relief in the form of grant money. And if that's also still possible to do, there's easements, I guess the issue of putting the final easements on the property on the agenda. And I've heard from some people that there are issues whether or not the language in the easements that are going to be recorded meet DEP regulations and requirements. Now, I think it would be prudent to postpone the vote on that, see if it's possible to get the grant money before you actually sign off on any easements, conservation easements, on those properties that might preclude the town from getting substantial grant money with regard to the property that's already been purchased. Additionally, on that issue, I note from at least the maps that were shown to us during some of the public presentations from the committee, my understanding that the project was really to try to preserve the land over there to keep it from being developed. But the maps pretty much show most of the property that's covered by the easements involve the pond and wetlands that would never be developed anyway. It seems to me more prudent, if this is going to be a conservation program, to get the most bang for your buck, you want to extend those conservation easements over property that's really property that can be developed. I don't know that you really preserve anything for the town when you put a conservation easement that you can't build buildings on a pond. With that, I'd ask your consideration in looking at those easements to determine whether or not maybe you go back to what was originally proposed, which was to cover almost 200 acres of the property, reserving only a small portion for the water towers, which I guess we don't need anymore because they're going up in someplace else. So maybe take a little bit more time, take a look at the suggestions Mr. Ellis made. The other issue, too, is that, and it's not entirely clear from the paperwork on the easements, but as many of you know, the pond as well as that property not only involve certain contested property rights with Mr. Torrance's company, but acknowledged property rights of other property owners in the area, both involving the pond and the property around it. And the conservation easements, the way they're written now, potentially impact those property rights and are going to cloud people's title. With the amount of litigation already going on, and no offense to Mr. Blanc and other counsel here, but we really don't need to be spending any more tax dollars on a new and different round of litigation involving that whole area. So take your time, make sure the homework is done now, before we go ahead, sign off on something, and find out there was a better way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stefacci. Is there anyone else that would like to speak under public delegations? I see no one for the first time. Mr. Cesario, we'll ask you if you'd like to speak for the third time.
Last time, yes. I would like to agree with Attorney Strafacci, but I would also like to bring Attorney Block into the equation. Attorney Block is the one who advised this board to indemnify AIG. And he didn't tell the entire story, because the entire story is, if in the compromise agreement, if AIG were to deny the claim, you were to pursue a claim with mutual cooperation from Torrance against AIG. Instead, what you did, according to a federal judge, is take a one-time lump sum premium of $275,000, which the town netted $175,000, to which you, Mr. Formica, admitted in your deposition that you knew there were 2 million plus claims pending against the town, and you said that was a prudent financial decision. It's not a prudent financial decision, and if there is a way out of this mess for all of you, and it makes sense for the people of East Lyme, you should probably take Attorney Strafacci's advice and definitely consider the proposal by Mr. Ellis. I mean, it is unconscionable that you indemnified an insurance policy and you misled the people of East Lyme, which, as you all know, I've accused you of fraud. And you actually sent me a letter saying, how dare you accuse me of, or Mr. Nickerson and Mr. Formica of criminal acts, when Mr. Torrance has now filed a suit in federal court charging you with conspiracy of unlawful acts. And unlawful acts is the same as criminal acts. You basically lied to the people of East Lyme in June 2011, when Mr. Nickerson put a motion forward saying that he wanted to indemnify AIG. In a deposition, Mr. Nickerson, in the deposition, said he didn't even know what indemnify meant. He's a 25-year plus insurance agent, and he put the town on the hook for millions of dollars of uninsurable liability, saying that he did not know what the word indemnify meant. And actually, Mr. Formica, in your deposition, you stated that you did not know what the word indemnify meant. I mean, I don't know how you can explain that to the taxpayers, that you thought it was a prudent decision to indemnify AIG. Mr. Block knew his responsibilities. He was counsel to you when you signed that agreement with AIG. You've been using Darrow's Ridge as a scapegoat for the $600,000 spent on litigation, which, by the way, doesn't make sense, because every year the Board of Finance allocates about $100,000. You've been spending $100,000 a year on litigation with Darrow's Ridge, let alone all the other things that go on in the town. And it's just a complete fraud. So if the settlement gets you guys out of this legal quagmire, you should definitely consider it. I mean, I don't know if I'd vote for it or against it, but it's definitely worth looking at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cesario.
You're welcome.
Anyone else like to speak?
Make one brief comment.
Mr. Strafacci.
Thank you again, John Strafacci, 16 Darrows Ridge Road. I just want to make sure my comments, I didn't confuse anybody, because I think I might have confused my neighbor, John Cesario. My comments mostly were directed at the conservation easement restrictions and the property that the town has already purchased for $4 million plus. And Mr. Ellis's comments about conservation easements and DEP, and I understand there are very specific requirements for that to get grant money for that property. I didn't want my comments extended to the proposal as it relates to Mr. Torrance or settlement of those cases. I've got real serious questions about whether or not what the town should be doing with that, and whether or not we should be spending millions of dollars on property worth considerably less than that for some purported offer that you're going to do away with certain needs. I think the town needs to move very slowly and very carefully on that. However, it's just that when I heard Mr. Ellis's comments about grant money available for the property that we already own across the pond, I think that needs to be looked at carefully to try to take advantage of that grant money. We already own the property. We want to make sure that those easements are drafted properly so that we can take advantage of perhaps $500,000 or $1 million in grant money for property we already own. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stafacci. Anyone else like to speak to the board under public delegations? Ms. Rack?
Karen Rack, 27 Black Point Road.
Good
I'd
evening.
just like to remind everyone that grant money is taxpayer money, regardless. It's not money that falls from the money tree. So it's either being taxed here, being taxed at the state. All grant money is taxpayer money, because there is no such thing as a town, it's the taxpayers. The town isn't an entity of itself, and either is the state.
Thank you, Ms. Rack.
Thank you, Mrs. Rack.
Anyone else like to speak under public delegations? Mr. Ellis, did you have something you'd like to add? Then I'd like to,
I'll get out of here after that. Chairman, Woodsman Land Trust, John Ellis. I would like to say that I've known Mr. Block for most of my adult life. Find him to be a great attorney and a great friend. I know Mr. Formica. I find him to be a great friend, great first selectman. And I know they'll do the right thing for the town. So if I lose in the end, I'll cry, but at the end of the day, I know they'll do the right thing. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Ellis. Anyone else like to speak under public delegations? All right, so we will close public delegations with this thought. The Board of Selectmen is precluded by FOI rules to respond to anything in public delegations, but there are plenty of opportunities. So sometimes we'll take things later on. But during public delegations, we're unable to respond. The next item then would be the approval of minutes for the meeting of November 6, 2013.
I'll move to approve the consent approval of minutes, sorry, of November 6, 2013, as submitted.
Second.
Motion has been made and second. There any discussion on these minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, abstain. And my apologies to Mrs. Hardy. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting that she is traveling and is unable to attend this evening. The next item is the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar for the meeting of November 20th, 2013, in the amount of $1,393.77.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Siri. Any discussion on the consent calendar? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed or abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is we have a short presentation for Mr. Salisbury, who is the Ledgelight Health District Director, and talk about the elevated rate of tick-borne diseases. Were you
Thank
going to
you.
be sitting at the, which?
I'll take mine over.
Huh? You want to sit or stand? He said he'd stand.
Thank you.
Because we can put a microphone there if you prefer to sit.
Thank you.
Is that yours?
It's an important problem, Mark.
Oh, okay.
Would you find a tick?
Not yet.
Oh.
There you go.
At least you got that going for us.
God, it's a tough audience. My presentation will be a lot tamer. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, selectmen rather, I'm Baker Salisbury, Director of Health for Ledgelight Health District, and thus your town health director. I know some of you know that the CDC, the parent of public health in the United States, stipulates that health departments shall carry out 10 essential services. if they are to be a full-time health department. The first and most important is, and I quote, to monitor the health status of your community. That means whether it's emergency room admissions for asthma of children, or sexually transmitted diseases in the adolescent population, or in this case, tick-borne diseases. It's one of the primary functions of the health department to monitor the health status of the community and report to you and discuss interventions where appropriate. Our epidemiologist, and because you have a full-time health department, we employ an epidemiologist whose function it is to monitor the health status of your community. Under my direction, because we saw some disturbing information last year, we undertook an 8-month study of reported tick-borne diseases in the district. The principal handout, the large handout you have before you, prepared in GIS format, represents the tick-borne disease rates for 2010 and 2011 throughout the district. I am here tonight, and as you can see by looking at this map, I will be talking to Waterford in 2 weeks. I am here tonight because we have, as you see here, the analysis reveals that East Lyme, and to a greater extent Waterford, have the highest rates of reported tick-borne diseases in the district. And since this is southeast Connecticut, the father of Lyme, we have some of the highest rates in the country. Lyme disease is not a joke. It's not a small thing. As you can see from the second page of that large color handout, the bar chart shows you the comparative rates of the 5 towns. We're excluding Groton City as a town. Of the 5 towns in the district, with Waterford and East Lyme substantially ahead of the others. You can also see on the other chart the age-adjusted, the age-specific rates for tick-borne diseases. And you can see at the bottom that the gender distribution is roughly equal. The specific numbers, which are not on this chart, if it should interest you, in this period of time, there were 127 reported cases of tick-borne diseases in East Lyme alone. Since those numbers, generally speaking across the nation, are substantially underreported, the actual number of cases will be considerably higher in any community. What this means, very simply, is that East Lyme and Waterford bear a disproportionate burden of tick-borne diseases. And these are, I must stress, all tick-borne diseases. The state